Everybody get the record prompt notification?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great.
All right, we are going live in 5 seconds.
Hello, everybody. So I know folks are logging in, but since we only have an hour, I'm just going to jump into our really brief introduction. So welcome to our webinar hosted by the American Public Human Services Association, or APHSA, in partnership with EY. Today's webinar topic is enabling digital technologies to improve programs and deliver accessible solutions. Next slide, please. So my name is Adrian Saldana. I'm an organizational effectiveness consultant at APHSA. I'd like a minute just to share with everybody an overview of APHSA and the work we do for and with our members. So APHSA is a membership organization that represents state and local health and human services agencies from across the country through their top level leadership. Next slide. We aim to deliver to our members through 3 core channels: influencing modern policies and practices with the goal of strengthening communities, building capacity through our conferences, technical expertise, publications, and OE consulting practice, and connecting members across a wide circle of stakeholders in the health and human services sector and with key partners. Next slide. So speaking of connecting members, I invite you all to save the date to the APHSA conferences we're hosting in 2023. Our Economic Mobility and Wellbeing Conference will be in Long Beach, California from August 27th to 30th. This year, our Information Technology Solutions Management, or ISM conference, has been combined with our annual Attorneys Education Conference from September 10th to 13th in Kissimmee, Florida. And our Staff Development and Training NSDTA conference will be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania from October 22nd to 25th. So check back on the APHSA website for more information on each of these conferences, including when registration opens. So just some light housekeeping items for this webinar. During the presentations, we're requesting that you put your questions for our presenters in the Q&A panel rather than the typical Zoom chat feature. If possible, our panelists will try to answer questions during their presentations, but there will also be time left at the end for questions. This webinar is being recorded and it will be shared with all registrants in the coming days. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for our panel discussion, Danielle Barnes, U.S. Human Services Lead at EY.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever in the US or the world that you're tuning into us. But we are delighted to be here with you all today. I'm excited to have such great panelists with us today. We have Sarah Dawson with us, who currently serves as the Director of Strategic Operations for Community Partnerships. And we also have Andrea Daines, I'm sorry, for the state of Colorado, if you couldn't see the flag behind her head. We also have with us Andrea Daines, who is our Global Human Services Leader for EY. So those are really big titles. And as we kind of set up the day for, or the next hour of our conversation, I just want to inform our participants, this will be an informal conversation. We're going to chat a little bit about their journeys and their journey of transformation, specifically digitally, and as it pertains to families with children under the age of 5. We're also going to share with you a little bit of groundbreaking research and give you a little bit of a teaser as to some information that's out there. Feel free to go ahead and drop those questions in the chat. We will try to address those live time. And as mentioned, we will save about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for live questions if we can. Last time we had such an amazing response and such a good conversation, I didn't want to stop our panelists, but feel free to jump in at any moment. So before we really get into the meat of today, I always like to start the conversation just with a little bit of personal information about you, about our panelists. Both of you have taken very different paths on your journey to your current roles. And this journey has really led you to the inspiration for digital transformation, specifically in the human services arena. Tell us a little bit about your background and what got you to where you are today. Sarah, we'll start with you.
Great. Thanks so much, Danielle, and welcome everyone. I'm really excited to spend the next hour with you all. And so a little bit of background on me. I'm a social worker by trade, and I worked in the nonprofit sector for a while before moving to the Colorado Department of Human Services about 5 years ago. And I knew in graduate school for social work, we, were practicing therapy and doing that really kind of one-on-one counseling. And every time I was in one of those practice sessions, everything just to me kept coming back to like the root of so many of these individual issues are actually systemic. They're actually kind of bigger community problems. So I really focused my work over the last decade and a half on solving those more systemic kind of community pieces. So while being at the department, I think a lot of you will probably, think that this is true. You always need more funding. You always need more staff to solve any of your problems. And so what other levers do we have out there that we can really be thinking about, in order to make some of those really big systemic changes for the people that we serve? And so I didn't learn about technology in social work school, but more and more really got in with our tech teams and started to see how that was a really underused lever of change that we had at the department. And so really dove into what we can do to increase efficiencies, use technologies to serve clients better. The very first meeting I ever said the words regression testing in, I think our tech team fell off their chairs and they're like, okay, she's invested, we're gonna do this. So that's really what brought me to the technology space, and will continue to, is that, no stone unturned, any lever of change that we can use to help our clients be successful. We're gonna do it here in Colorado. So thanks, Danielle.
I love that. What I love the most is that your journey isn't unlike what I would guess is the majority of those of us who are on the call today. It's you started in the field, you had the passion for the work itself, and then you figured out that there's a bigger, broader purpose and ability to make change. And so that's what really led you into where you are. I love that. Andrea, you have a similar story with your background. Tell us how in the world you got to be in technology and human services.
Absolutely. So I have 30 years in HHS, 10 as a state employee. So I worked in both child welfare and Medicaid on the other side of the desk, if you will. Fully appreciate everything each state employee on this call today is doing every single day. To your point, Sarah, with not enough money, not enough staff, and not enough time in the day. So a big thank you to those of you that are serving in that capacity. The 20 years after that, 10 years as a state employee have been spent in the national practices, always focused on HHS and really sitting at that intersection of data, technology, and policy and the program work. Everything that I've been involved in, whether it was HIPAA compliance, which really dates me, that right there validates how old I am, or the HIE work that we did, which used to be CHINs and RIOs and then HIE. All of those things, they really draw together the policy impacts, the programmatic designs and processes, and the opportunity that technology provides to do things in a different way. So I've enjoyed kind of bringing those things together, but it really hit home for me just a handful of years ago when our youngest came into our home through the foster care system. And I got to navigate the Medicaid program and the child welfare program from the outside in. And when I was asked to fax things, because that was, and again, God bless the individual I was working with in the child welfare agency, but I was told that was a more secure form of communication than email. And I ended up taking the papers to the office, and the fax machine was sitting behind the receptionist's desk, you know, in an unlocked office. So it's just that opportunity to shake things up, to think about things differently, and especially for a generation of individuals that are coming up with technology as kind of the way they do everything. The aging out foster youth population is near and dear to my heart. And if we don't communicate with them in a more digital way, we lose the opportunity to serve them. So hopefully, Danielle, that's enough of background, but it's definitely a passion area for me.
I love that. And you really hit, I think, on the heart of what we're going to talk about today. And that is the fact that, as the rest of the audience doesn't know, but we were sharing a little bit of insight into our personal families, and we have children that do not know what life is like without a cell phone. I was telling people my son has no idea that TV used to be live, and we used to have to sit down at 8 o'clock and record it, because they've only known technology in their whole lives. And so we have to figure out ways to engage that population, but not leave anybody else behind. I use the example of my father-in-law, who has a brand new Apple phone because the sons finally decided that he needed an upgrade from his flip phone, and he still only uses it to make phone calls. And that's it. So how do we make sure that we hit all of the different personas of individuals in between and how they want to interact with government? So I love that you set that up for us so perfectly. Sarah, I'm going to flip back to you because I want to just kind of hone in just for a second. You have a beautiful title. I wish there's one that I would have copied when I was in state government. What exactly does it mean to be the Director of Strategic Operations for Community Partnerships?
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. It's kind of a wordy title. And so a lot of people are like, what do you actually do all day? And the way I typically answer that is just solving problems, right? Whether it's trying to do kind of that higher level thinking, strategic planning, whether it's the day-to-day operations and how we can make things more efficient. At the Colorado Department of Human Services. And as you all know, our work runs the gamut, right? It's everything from anti-poverty programs and determining eligibility for all of those. For us, it's also child support services, domestic violence programs, child welfare, youth services, aging and adult services. again, kind of running the gamut of everything we can do to really promote safety, well-being, and allowing people to thrive here in Colorado. So any problem that bubbles up to the top at the Department of Human Services here in Colorado, I'm usually involved. So that should really be my title, is just problem solver.
Chief problem solver. I love it.
Exactly.
Well, you talked about all of these different required partners. You talked about the citizens and the community partners and the clients and the families and the whole ecosystem of individuals that have to be a part of transformation. Colorado is state administered, county run.
Yeah.
And you all have in the last year or so, couple of years, and are currently planning for massive integrated data management and systems. Tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, of course. So right in Colorado, we're a local control state. So we are state supervised and county administered for all of our health and human services programs, really all of our local affairs programs here in Colorado. So we've got 64 counties. And so that's another big responsibility, is for us to really be there to support counties to make sure they had everything they need to administer the programs at a local level. And so technology, again, is one of those big pieces where if we kind of look at the last 10 to 15 years, it's like, ooh, okay, we got some room to grow here on how we can really support our county partners in administering programs. So we call our program here interoperability. But at the end of the day, you know, kind of social work speak, we all know it's just serving a client for all their needs. That's really all we're trying to do. And have that technology really help us do that better. Our kind of big goal with our interoperability program here in Colorado is, I don't want a client or Coloradan to know that there's 20 different funding streams, 6 different programs, 3 different departments, and 2 different counties who are working to get them all of their services. We want them to be able to walk into any door and identify their needs with us, and we're able to serve them. And they don't need to see or know kind of all the work on the back end. We want to really improve that customer service for them, and allow them to have more time back in their day. And not running around, you know, trying to get papers to different offices, like Andrea was talking about, figuring out how do I even fax something if that's the only way. You know, those are things that we can help solve for folks and make it a lot easier. So right now we're in the process of creating a single work management and document storage system across kind of our big 4 databases. So again, our child support, our child welfare, our child care assistance, and then all of our anti-poverty programs, TANF, Medicaid, SNAP, all of those, right? Because we know that the population that is receiving those is similar. You know, we had them in different databases, but that's not client-centered. That's not how they live their life. And so we really feel like it's an opportunity for us to start using the technology to really mirror what a client experience is in real life. And the thing I get the most excited about is one day we will have what I refer to as the pizza tracker. If my pizza delivery place can tell me that I placed my order, that they're making my pizza, that it's out for delivery, our clients deserve the same about all of their services. They really, they should be entitled to their information and know like, oh, yep, I turned in everything for my SNAP application. I've got my redetermination interview in about 6 months, so I'm good there. I've got a child support case coming up in a month. All of the different pieces that they're trying to navigate in our systems, really having that one-stop shop that shows them where they are in all of our services and benefits, so that they have the knowledge and are able to know where their things are, when they're going to be getting their benefits, and just make it easier for our workers as well, so they can really get back to doing what they want to do, which is spend time with clients. and really enable more of that work rather than some of the paperwork and those kinds of things, which most people didn't go to social work school for the paperwork. So we see this as a really big win for clients and also a big win for our workers to really get back and have more time to do what they came to do in human services.
I love that. That was a big part of the mantra that we were operating on when we went through our transformation inside the state of Tennessee, because same thing, I would always say, nobody wakes up on a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning and wants to go sit in a human services office and continue to share the same information hour after hour after hour. And then, oh, and by the way, I need the same 3 forms, but now I need 1 extra form over here. And I literally remember somebody saying, oh, that's not my office. It's down the hall. So I appreciate that we are all leaning in, and I say all because I think the whole country is really leaning into really getting back to figuring out ways to get around some of that bureaucracy of the processes to really get at the heart. It's like you mentioned, back to the heart of why we're all in this business. And so bringing that back up just a little bit, Andrea, you talk a lot about the intersections of technology and processes and people. You have had a long career in understanding the technologies, but you also have both the personal experience and the programmatic experience. Talk to us about how important is technology in the transformation of human services delivery?
Well, I'm going to go back to kind of I think one of the big hindrances that we still struggle with is this idea that technology and policy are mutually exclusive. And I say that, and some people might, raise an eyebrow, but you go into most agencies or programs and you have the IT folks physically even sometimes located in a separate building. And then you have your program staff and they're operating and they're doing what they do every day. They're putting together requests for changes or updates to the system or access to data. Those are sometimes flowing through an intermediary, a bureau or something sitting in between the 2 groups, and then over to IT. And that division of that conversation, I'll say, has really been a hindrance for us across HHS. We have got to get better at having a holistic conversation that includes those who understand the business and those who understand the power of data and technology. And we're getting some push from our federal funding partners to do that. If you're familiar in Medicaid, there's outcomes-based certification now. There's also a requirement through several of the other programs to speak about business outcomes that are expected from a technology transformation project. And you have to be able to do this in order to get access to that federal money. So I think we've got an opportunity to again, begin having that more holistic conversation and integrating the strategic vision that the business has for delivering services with the power that the IT teams know exists. We've kind of said on the data side, it's time for data to stop being a byproduct of the program and the normal processes of the program and begin to be the fuel that drives the program forward and sometimes in a different direction. That requires all of us to be open-minded, to be flexible, to be willing to lean into things that may not be specifically our area of expertise, but to engage in that conversation and not seeming to plug ISM, but I get really excited about that event in particular because I think we get a lot of that cross-pollination and conversation. So kudos to APHSA for that spectacular opportunity too.
Awesome. Thank you. I do want us to address one of the questions that came in, and Sarah, feel free to hop in if I've gotten this wrong. One of the questions was, do you have a visual of what this integrated system looks like? And I understand that this is your future state vision and that it's in development. So I just want to make sure that we've got that clear and correct.
Yeah, a great question. So what I'm deeming the pizza tracker is definitely our future state. So I don't have a fun visual on that yet, but we hopefully will in the next 2 years or so really be working towards that future state. One thing I'll kind of add, right? What we're talking about, and again, the future state is really exciting to think about and really big and bold. But I think we all know that some of us maybe are still on like mainframe technology. We got some tech debt going on. We're like, how do we get this funded? Kind of all of those pieces are real things that we have to tackle to get to that ultimate vision. And not only that, but really just the fundamentals, as Andrea, I love what you were saying about data to be the fuel. We have a lot of kind of like data quality, data input, data entry, those kinds of issues too with our technology systems. For one example I always use is really making sure that the Sarah Dawson that is in the system that's giving TANF is the same Sarah Dawson that's in the child welfare system, right? If someone types in Sarah without the H in one system and with the H in the other system, that's a really easy thing to happen. And right there's kind of a fundamental issue with how we get to that bigger pizza tracker vision. So there's so much foundational work that states can start doing, that seems kind of small in scale, but is really actually the fundamental pieces and monumental to really get us to the state we want to be. Being able to match folks across all of our systems, really cleaning up data quality pieces are some of those seemingly lower hanging fruit than getting all the way to the pizza tracker state, which is where we hope to be in the next 2 to 3 years.
So when we talk about the pizza tracker state, right, this future state, one of the most important concepts of this conversation is making sure we have full digital inclusion. And our states are very different. However, they are very similar. There are no two people that have the same experience. EY actually engaged in multi-year research that was released in 2021 that details how individuals want to interact digitally with government. Part of this, we called it the Connected Citizen Report, and we do have that available if anybody is interested, does identify the 7 personas of people and how they want to interact with government. I think that's critical as we start developing systems so that we can say, okay, there's a person who wants to be digitally inclusive. There's a person who is a little bit still skeptical. We reignited that research last year and the results were released earlier this year. The focus of part 2 of this research really focused on families with children under the age of 5 and how individuals really want to interact with government when it comes to exactly what you're saying, Sarah, connecting these services. So one of the things that we found, and I want to delve into this a little bit, is there's a little bit of mistrust when it comes to giving access or a citizen giving access to their information for government. However, when the information is very explicit as to why they're using the information, what information they're using, how it's going to be connected, we saw through interviews, through actual people, a 180-degree just shift of their philosophy. And it is absolutely here, take my information so that if I am TANF eligible, I can also apply for SNAP without me having to do anything. So it's very interesting to know that one of the key things that we found through all of this really does boil down to transparency. I kind of want to set the stage for the second half of our conversation. The other part of this research really gave us some insight as we think about agencies that are undergoing massive digital transformation, like you all are, as are many other of the agencies on the phone. What we found was that there really need to be 8 key priorities that agencies really should lean into as they're going through this digital transformation. Now, I like the way you set it up, Sarah. There is no easy check button, right? But I do think these are things that should be floating around and should be addressed as agencies are going through that. And I'm going to rattle them off quickly. I will put them in the chat, but because I know I'm not expecting anybody to take notes, and we'll certainly get some information out to all of our participants. But very quickly, the 8 key priorities: enabling integrated service delivery, which you spoke about, eliminating siloed IT to drive interoperability, designing services around the end user, accelerating data sharing with trust and controls, optimizing funding, promoting workforce transformation, fostering strong digital leadership, and then, of course, delivering equitable digitized services for all. Does any of this shock you as part of these 8 key findings? Neither one of you all can jump in here.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I think these are spot on. These are exactly the things that we've been wrestling with in Colorado to really drive us in our interoperability program. Again, for us, it's always starting about the end user, end client. So that designing services around the end user, that's always got to be the big vision, the big goal, the outcome that we're looking for. And I think funding, again, a huge thing. And, all leaders, all staff on this call, that it's always top of mind. You've got a great idea. You want to serve people better, but we need funding in order to do that. And so I'm happy to share kind of some of the tips and tricks that Colorado has tried to optimize funding. But I think these 8 are really spot on. And, kind of as we move forward, making sure that we're at the forefront of equitable digital services for all. I love the way that you all put that. Thinking about all of our accessibility needs right up front as we're building out our software, as we're building out our technology, to make sure that we're including that in all steps that we take.
Danielle, I can't add to what Sarah just said on those 8 points. I think she emphasized all of them. I'll play a little bit of the flip side for a moment and say, I think in the transformation initiatives that I've been a part of, one of the biggest hindrances to achieving everything that you just articulated is culture shift, culture change. It is, when we talk about optimizing funding, the way to optimize funding is to really understand when multiple programs are impacting the same individuals, and then do a shared funding request, that joint APD, and get the maximum federal amount of funding that you can from each of the programs. And we all know who pays more, so you know where you start and you go down the line, right? But where we run into some challenges with that is really around agencies being willing to take the time and develop the trust and relationships with each other to be able to lean in to serve and strategize together. It becomes a matter of, I don't know that I want to share my budget. I don't know that I want to share my priorities. I don't know that I agree with the priorities that you're setting. Just trying to really be transparent here, because I think everybody wants transformation. But these are the little places where it begins to rub, and you've got to really address that head on up front to be able to optimize on those 8 points that you just articulated. Sarah, I see your face, so I'm assuming Colorado probably has none of those challenges. You guys you've all just lined up perfectly on strategy, funding, and everything. But I would imagine in other places, there's a challenge culturally to make this happen.
You all both raised 2 very important points that I want us to pause on and really take a deep dive into for a minute, because they're very important. So I'm going to turn to Sarah to talk about funding. And then Andrea, I'm going to come back to you to delve back into that cross-programmatic breaking of silos. So we're going a little bit out of just off the cuff, because you all raised such great points here. Sarah, you have actually said, we only have enough funding to be compliant. We don't have enough funding to be innovative.
Yeah.
And man, oh man, that has stuck with me, and I can't get it out. And I've repeated it everywhere we go. But how do you overcome that funding obstacle when you are trying to be innovative in government?
Yeah, thanks for that, Danielle. That's definitely something that I talk about a lot, right? We all know we get, kind of new rules, new things coming out, and we can only keep up with the compliance side of things. Even though we've got some really innovative ideas and projects, they usually go kind of on the back burner, bottom of the list, as we have to make sure we stay compliant. And so how do we kind of get out of that cycle? What can we do to start also making some headway in the innovation space? And so a few different ways. First, as Andrea said, and I feel like you set me up for this, those APDs, those advanced planning documents, and our federal partners are our friends. They are invested in this work. Here in Colorado, we have a joint APD with CMS, FNS, and ACF. So all three federal partners are on the same page with us. And then our other state agencies. Medicaid is actually run through a different state agency here in Colorado. And so Department of Human Services, we have to be lockstep with them. It's healthcare policy and financing here in Colorado. So Andrea's absolutely right. It's about building relationships with your sister agencies in your state. It's about building those relationships with your federal partners. And again, always starting with that why and that big vision of like, if we had this, we could get to X. And we all know that usually the return on investment pretty clearly shows that that bigger vision is worth the investment. So that's always kind of an easy one to think through when it comes to funding, is that if we did things more efficiently, if we use technology better, we will save money in the long term. The other really big
I do
thing-
want to pause there though,
Yeah.
because I don't want us to miss that point. Yes, we'll do it more effectively, but it's worth saying again that frees up the caseworker to do the work that they are there to do, not that we are going to be taking away jobs. I can't say that enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Danielle. I think we all know that staff in human services, and especially our frontline staff, we do not have enough time in the day. That's just how the work runs. And so again, anything we can do to save folks time, that's more time with clients. That's more time getting to our bigger and better outcomes for the people that we're serving. Absolutely. So it's more about shifting resources, right? And how we're really able to do that to move from more of the like really compliance driven to more innovation driven. And then, another big thing that we've done in Colorado, and absolutely Andrea goes with the culture shift. This does not happen overnight for sure. And we had to partner with our legislators to really make sure that we were all on the same page about what this would really take. I'm sure lots of any tech folks on the call are aware of kind of the agile methodology and how technology projects kind of moved from waterfall to agile and what that looks like. I did not know that did not learn that in social work school again. So I had to learn that. And, same with our legislators. They have all different kinds of backgrounds and jobs. And so what we were able to do here in Colorado is that there are a few that had a technology background. And we're really excited about the ability for Colorado to start moving into more of an agile mindset. But the really big thing that then we came to is that the way that funding works, very simply, agile is doing smaller things, testing them out, see if they worked. If it works, keep going. If it doesn't, rethink. So it's really more just an iterative process rather than doing a planning for a whole year, building all this stuff and then putting it out there, right? So it's just smaller chunks. So that you can really check in and see, okay, are we building the right thing? Did it do what we actually wanted it to do? Did the social work language transfer to the technology language? All of those kinds of pieces. And so once we got some legislators on board to really understand that the way that, at least in Colorado, and I think it's very typical in other states, technology is funded is the same way we fund building of buildings. It's capital funding. You get one lump sum, you build the thing, and then you got ongoing maintenance and operation. And we're like, so this agile environment is not like building a building anymore, right? We're doing little pieces. We're making sure that we're still on the right path. And so we can't tell you like exactly how much it's going to cost or when exactly it's going to be done, because we want to use taxpayer dollars well. We want to make sure that we're checking in more periodically, more iteratively, so that we're building the right thing. And so that really helped us get some headway at the legislature to get kind of this ongoing dedicated operating funding for some of our bigger systems. We're not totally there yet, of course, again, building out that culture. But that's something I would really, really encourage folks to kind of start thinking about and building those relationships with legislators to kind of show how typically budgeting in government is really not quite compatible with the best way to build technology and how we can start to bridge that gap, right? It's not going to be perfect, but we can definitely start to bridge that gap. And then of course, people always like to hear, let me tell you about how much federal funds we're going to bring into this state by doing this, right? So we have found that to be successful in Colorado, and definitely encourage other folks to take that path as well.
There's so many things that we could delve into on that. I think that was a phenomenal description of just how do you get started. And you teed it up quite nicely, because we talk about, and Andrea, you mentioned culture change. And when we're talking about massive transformation, we know, I always have to say this slowly, it takes a long time to right a ship. I have to be very careful, I'm Southern. So you have to make sure that we make this shift in a way that people feel like they are a part of the process, not being left behind, and see the benefit of the transformation. And I use that word because it's the best word for it. We could spend 4 days on key strategies for how do we do transformation? How do we change the culture? How do we engage work staff? We've got 20 minutes left. So in this, right? So I'm not going to do that. But Andrea, you have been known to say, from your lens, people have to stop thinking of the IT group as a separate agency. Talk to us about how do you make that culture shift from realizing that program is actually driving IT versus IT driving program, and the importance of cross-programmatic work in between there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to dovetail nicely with what Sarah said. When you talk about going from big projects to smaller, incremental, iterative approaches, if you go back a few years and you think about when all these agencies began to stand up the first enterprise data warehouse, and the goal was to bring all of the data together in this, we just wanted all the data. And then we found out that you have to have a special set of skills and understanding of the data to be able to write a query, to be able to pull forward actionable and accurate, I should say accurate first, information out of that large cache of data. So the EDW promise was all the data together, you're going to be able to do all kinds of cool new stuff. And it falls a little bit flat. I worked on a project probably 15 years ago with the state of Illinois where we did a 14 agency MOU that basically was a blanket MOU saying we're going to share data across the board and we'll figure out the details later. And it took months and many attorneys to get everybody to sign. And because leadership changes at agencies and programs so frequently, we ended up having to do about 3 cycles to get a full suite of executives who understood and agreed. And there wasn't a lot that actually happened as a result of that at the end. I think our approach of trying to do everything has been overwhelming. There's too many transitions happening in real time. We've got to think more specifically about what is the problem we're trying to solve. What is the problem that we're trying to solve for the foster youth, for the foster family, for the family of origin. What problem can we solve? And does the problem solving mean that we need more than one agency or program to be involved? Does it mean that we need to agree to share specific parts of the data? Not all, we don't need all the data for everything. We need specific pieces of information to be able to provide additional value to that person or to that family. And if we think about solving problems like that, a couple things happen. Number one, nobody wants to be the person in the room saying, I'm not going to participate in solving that problem. So you start to get some agreement that we need to do a better job here. When it comes to data sharing agreements, it's very powerful to ask attorneys and others that have to agree to say, don't say no because, tell us yes if. Because if we cannot overcome this obstacle and share this information, here's the harm that continues to happen to these individuals, to these families. It's a much more powerful conversation, a little bit of, pressure to really begin to think about, do I want to be the person that's not leaning in and not helping solve that problem? So if we come at it from a problem perspective, we really start to see some change. Then we also get quicker results because we're not waiting 5 years for a major new system implementation to see some impact and effect. We're getting quicker wins. We're building momentum. We're giving elected officials something that they feel really good about communicating to constituents. The agency staff feels very good about reporting up to the governor's office. And ultimately, the most important thing, the people that we are responsible for serving are feeling the benefit of that increased collaboration across the programs.
Andrea, I don't take offense to the lawyer statement. You've heard me say this a million times. I am a lawyer by trade, which is either makes me, well, I will definitively say makes me the absolute worst client. Because when a lawyer would tell me, no, we can't share data, I would lean in like a 2-year-old and say, but why? And they said, because the law. I said, but why? Show me where. And, you really do. I think there's a question of interpretation. And I think just shifting the culture of, well, if it could be read that way, but it could also be read this way. Or to your point, if we did it this way, we can also accomplish what we are trying to accomplish. And it does take that leaning in. But at the end of the day, it really does take someone to kind of push back politely and just say, how can we do it? What can we do? Do not be the 2-year-old. Do not throw a tantrum in the middle of the office, unless that works for you. I don't know. We got a great question that I want to dovetail us into, because this is one of the questions that is always top of mind. I know for me now and in my current role, and I know it's on the tops of minds of likely everyone on the call, and that is outcomes. We talk a lot about how do we, especially in the human services field, make or be able to really demonstrate our outcomes. And Jennifer says to you, Sarah, thank you for the comment about data being the fuel and moving to focus on outcomes. Can either of you speak to how there can be strong feedback loops with clients and other community partners like advocates and application assistants to ensure that data is being interpreted reflects the experiences of clients?
I'll jump in, I think, just because I hit the mute button faster. We're both eager on this one. Very simply put, we will never get true objectives that are measurable if we continue to stay in a programmatic silo. Programs measure administrative ticks. How many, how much, how long, how often, how much did that cost? But person-centric details, that's where you start to see outcomes. If we really want to be able to track, measure, monitor, and see improvement in outcomes, it has to be person-centric, not just programmatic. And I think that's a key shift again in the culture for us to think about, not just how am I measuring what SNAP data I have about this person, but how am I able to really understand the improvement of this individual's life because they interacted. And Danielle, I've heard you say this 100 times. How do we know they're better off? Because they interacted with us. And part of that can be done through internal data. And part of it requires actually asking the people we're serving, how do you feel about this? Is this helpful? Has this been beneficial to you? What would you like to have had that you didn't have? And there's a lot of good sentiment monitoring that's happening. We're involved in quite a bit of that work. And I love the fact that we're starting to incorporate that voice into determining whether or not we've gotten a good outcome.
Yeah, I'll definitely piggyback onto that. Definitely agree with everything Andrea said. And I think in Colorado, we really tried to focus on that family or client experience to inform our work, right? At the end of the day, that's why we're here. And so we've got a few different avenues. We have what we call our Family Voice Council. So for our department, there's 20 folks that meet every month, have been doing so for I think about 7 or 8 years now. And we bring so many questions and things to them. And those 20 folks have been or are currently receiving at least 2 of our services. And they're really able to point out where some of the flaws in the system are, what things would make their lives easier. And we've got those feedback loops with them and they hold us accountable for sure. You know, hey, you said that you were going to be able to make this piece easier. Where are we at with that? And so that's one of our avenues to make sure that we've got client voice. We also, again, you know, we're county administered here in Colorado. So we've got lots of counties who do a phenomenal job engaging their families and clients to give the state feedback as well. So making sure that we've got those feedback loops and then really going out and seeking partnership with groups, right? Government can be very scary, even though we don't, you know, mean to be, but recognizing that kind of power dynamic and really going to folks and just listening, learning, trying to be at community events, you know, really picking up anything we can that will be beneficial to clients. Anything to make things slightly easier for them is definitely what we want to see. And quite honestly, that's why we have our interoperability program. It came from our Family Voice Council and our clients saying like, I thought you were already sharing our data. Why do I have to submit this twice? You know, and it dawns on us like, yeah, why are we doing it this way? Always kind of wanting to challenge the status quo. And one thing I'll share, kind of that legal sharing data framework is something Colorado has struggled with as well. And what I like to say when we meet with our lawyers is, you know, people wrote the laws. I think we change them too. So yeah, if there's a gap, if there's something that's saying we can't share for X reason, like, let's see if we can go and change it. Anything to make lives easier for our folks.
So I'd like to open it up, and we do have a question in the chat. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to drop those because we are going to answer some of those as we go through the last bit of our session together. But we have another question from Jennifer, who again asks a very poignant question regarding the designing services around end user needs. How does a state with county agencies balance the needs of consumers as end users when those needs are sometimes interpreted as being in conflict with the needs of eligibility workers? And I think that can go for not just county administered. I think that can goes for anybody. I love that you've got this feedback loop with your parents, but what do you do, sort of boiling down this question in my own words, what do you do when that benefit or that change that you make conflicts with what the eligibility worker thinks is going to be easier?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great question. And any kind of states out there that are state supervised and county administered, it's a balance always, right? We've got 64 different counties, 64 different ways of doing things and thinking. So how do you really get that input and that feedback and make sure, because at the end of the day, it's not state employees who are the end users of these products. It is the county users. So for our interoperability program, we tried to learn some lessons from past technology mistakes. I like to say, let's not make the same mistakes. Let's make new mistakes when we make them. And so the way that we have staffed this project is actually contracted out to individual counties. So we've got about 8 folks from different counties around our state, and we contract with them for 20 hours a week. So they still work in their county. They are right there in the front lines with their county workers. They can see the work that they're doing, but then half their time is dedicated to this interoperability program. And that to us has really helped close that gap, right? Because sitting here in a state office, I'm never going to have the same experience, but sitting in a county office, watching folks do their work. So we've got to find those innovative ways, not just kind of committee meetings and those kinds of things, but how can we really try to bridge that gap more? And we found this joint staffing model has been really helpful in building technology that works for our county partners.
Love that. And
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, well, I'm coming to you to ask you.
I was just gonna add in there real quick. I think one of the tools that I've seen used more frequently in HHS recently, which is really good, is journey mapping. And when you do journey mapping, for those who may not be familiar, you actually interview real people receiving services and real people working in, it might be a county office, might be a state office. When you develop out that journey map, at least the way that our teams do it, you line up the processes of the experience of the constituent and the experience of the employee, and you can look holistically at where are the things that are working well, where are the pain points or the friction points, and you can work to resolve those pain points or friction points in a way that benefits both simultaneously. So doing them side by side and being able to see it that way, I think is super helpful. It also goes back to Danielle, something you said earlier, which is making sure everyone understands the process and why we're doing what we're doing and the benefit to them and to those that we serve. So seeing it laid out like that, that's a super useful methodology.
Love that. I want to end us on the topic that is top of mind for everyone. It is our biggest asset and our biggest heartache at the moment, and that is our workforce. Across the country, we know that workforce has been hit specifically in the human services field, obviously in every arena, but more specifically in our area. And we're having a hard time recruiting, and we're having a hard time retaining. And the question that I ask to you both as we wrap up today is, and Andrea, you used this as a bit of a, I'm going to steal it and change the words a bit, but how do you deal with change fatigue as you continue to motivate your staff as they're moving through all of these different changes?
Yeah, communication's key. As basic and simple and non-fancy as that sounds, making sure people have a voice and that they understand the direction that the agency is taking, that the program is taking, I think is really critical. And there's also the piece about modernizing the job requirements, the jobs that we're actually trying to hire for. No joke, within the last 5 years, had a state agency that was looking for a redacting analyst, and the job description included a Sharpie marker. And I don't know anybody coming out of college that's going to be attracted to that job. So I think there's an opportunity from a digital perspective to modernize the work that we do to attract additional pools of talent. And then as we get into all those changes and transformations and iterations, really just being intentional about communicating and helping people understand. We know if we all have relationships. I don't mind if things are changing, but I do really want to have some idea of why and what my role is in that change.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think it's a great question to end on. And I don't think that change management should ever be underestimated, right? It is a absolute foundational piece to any work that we're doing. And it takes time. We took 2 full years here in Colorado to do the change management to get to where we are right now with this kind of single work management and document management system that we're building in interoperability. 2 full years to really make sure that that is what would solve our county workers' problems and to get folks on board because we knew that if we didn't have all county buy-in and them to see the value and for them to rubber stamp it themselves, it wasn't going to work. That's thousands of employees that you are asking to change their day-to-day job. And so really making sure that folks understand what it is that you're doing and that they tell you that it's valuable, not us trying to sell them what we think we should be building, but really saying like, this is what I hear the problem is. You've got to enter things 5 different times. When you're doing eligibility for this, for your child support, you should be able to look up that they're on Medicaid and that should automatically populate for you, using those really small examples that someone's dealing with every day. And then they're like, yeah, if you could do that, that would be phenomenal. And it's like, perfect. Those are the problems that we want to solve with this. And that's why it's worth it to do the hard, painful work of change management, kind of moving forward to help all individual workers to make their jobs easier, spend more time with clients, get to that overall vision of really creating a better integrated human services delivery system.
There's one thing that I just want to double down on, if you will, in what you said, and it's really putting in the work on the front end. If we're going to ask our teams their thoughts on how do we make this better for you, what suggestions do you have? And I highly, highly recommend that you do. We traveled across the state and did just that. The flip side, and I want to take us back to the same thing we talked about with our community partners, is you got to have that feedback loop. They got to feel like they've been heard, even if it's something small, that they are a part of this change process. So we could do a whole nother session on change management and change. Ladies, I am just thrilled. This has been the best part of my entire week. And I have just enjoyed having a fireside conversation with you both, just to talk about some of the pressing things that are happening and in human services and how we can truly make big change for good. So thank you both for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Adrian, I think I'm turning it back over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we will be sharing this recording with all the registrants in the coming days, but I just want to extend another round of thanks to our fantastic panelists. Thank you to all the participants for your questions, and have a great day, everybody.